Justin Smith of Palmetto Coast Exotics.
And I'm Phil Wolf of the Nephris Initiative.
This is the Herpeticulture Podcast, which is part of the Herpeticulture Network. Enjoy the show. It's recording.
Nice.
Give me any sort of time.
Yeah,
Okay.
it just says that Justin is recording the call.
There we go.
Okay.
All right, so let's give this a shot.
All right.
This is not our usual thing. We're using Skype instead of StreamYard, so I don't know if the audio levels are going to be any different or not, but we'll find out. This is episode 126 of the Herpeticulture Podcast. I'm Justin Smith of Palmetto Coast Exotics.
I am Phil Wolf of the Nephris Initiative, and tonight we are joined by a very special guest, the one, the only, Mr. Alexander England.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you.
Man, I've been looking forward to this episode for since we originally talked about it, which has been a couple weeks now. You've become sort of the guy as far as squams go, and other awesome arboreal venomous. Since me and Phil are both venomous guys, we figured this is a perfect time to talk more about venomous. So,
yeah.
But we do have a few sponsors to talk about before we dive headfirst into this arboreal deliciousness.
Correct. Which is Steve Snake's Venom Hot Sauces. Check them out if you haven't already. They are delicious. And then Sean at MP Cages and Exotics. So if you need a rack, you need a cage, Sean's the guy to hit up. And whatever you need, he seems to be pretty able to do it. So if you can dream it, he can build it. But we just survived Hurricane Elsa. I don't know what you got from that, Phil, but it was pretty rowdy last night here.
Did you guys actually get it over you or no?
Yeah, I think we got at least part of it over us because it was really windy and there's been power outages all day and all kinds of crazy stuff. So
yeah, we got we got lucky. It just went completely around the tip of Florida, and I know the West Coast and by Billy and stuff, they got hit pretty good, but we got just feeder bands, and it was just really, really poopy weather for 3 or 4 days. But other than that, we're good. So
it's just stupid humid.
Yeah, and it's crazy, man, because people talk about herping in the rain and herping after a storm, herping before a storm, barometric pressure changing, low pressure system flows in and all this stuff. So Anna Marie and I went out last night and to hit the cane fields, and the only living things we saw were cane toads and barn owls. So, I mean, obviously those owls are probably eating any snakes on the road and stuff like that, but it was creepy because there was nothing out there, and they probably know the storm was coming,
Well, it's all been working in Chris's favor because his first night in West Texas, our buddy Chris Paintjob, they found some Alterna and an Ornatus and pretty much a lot of the stuff that we didn't see. So
yeah, what was that one rat snake he posted?
That was Emery Eye.
Oh, okay. It was really funky looking.
Yeah,
good stuff, man.
Herping out west, and you got to chase the rains and the pressure change. That's where it's at.
Yeah, we were just out there. What was it? The beginning of last month.
Yeah,
for a week.
4 weeks
and,
now. Yeah.
I mean, we did pretty good. Did better than some other groups, but it was kind of hit or miss. We found some night snakes and some atrox and some other stuff, but we were looking. I'm a big Baird's rat guy, so I was looking for Baird's and subox, and we didn't get any of that. So next time.
Yeah. I've only been out there once, and I went out there with my buddy Andy, and I mean, we had fun. We saw 6-7 species, and I caught a suboc. That was a cool one to see in the wild. Rat snakes. I'm with you, man. I'm all about the rat snakes. They're always good to see.
There's so much stuff out there, man. It's crazy.
Yeah.
There's something for everyone. But so how does one become the guy for arboreal venomous? How did you get to what you like? Get into specifically sort of the stuff you have. I mean, I know you have some other colubrids and whatnot from the looks of it. But where did the venomous thing start?
I think the snake started from growing up, camping and hiking with my dad. Like, I didn't do the Disneyland and, Universal Studios. Those weren't my childhood fun trips. My childhood fun trips were going to Arkansas to hike the Butterfield Trail with my dad, or going to Yellowstone to hike, or, part of the Appalachian Trail, and all over Oklahoma. That was what I did, and chasing snakes and lizards. And then, as I grew up, I found some copperheads, and I thought, boy, that's a pretty snake, and took them home, started keeping them, was really just fascinated with vipers, the head structure, the behavior, the way that they move. And then just, from being a youngster, and, when I told my mom when I was like 6, I was like, I want a snake. And she said, well, you read books and learn and figure out what you need to do. I read all these books that I checked out from the library, and, all the books are filled with pictures of eyelash vipers, crazy red bush vipers, all the different bright, ornately colored and patterned trims of Southeast Asia. And those are just the things that I saw from day one, and was just fascinated with the variety of colors and patterns, and, again, all the head structures. They're just so stinking pretty. And, the first arboreal venomous I ever got were Atheris nichii, the sedge vipers, Great Lakes bush vipers, whatever you want to call them. Was at a show in Tulsa, and I had my license in Oklahoma at that time, and I had, the miscellaneous stuff. I had some old world vipera, macrovipera, some bothrops, and Cape cobras, just kind of the standard variety stuff. But I always, kind of focused on vipers. Anyway, I'm at a show. Random dude's like, hey, I got something you might like. And I'm like, all right. And so he goes and shows me in a styrofoam box under his table some little delis with some little dirty gray black snakes with scraggly looking scales. And I knew exactly what they were.
That's awesome.
I knew they were freaking nichii, and I was like, oh shit, I'll take them. And I didn't know in detail or anything about them or about keeping them. And, he's like, they're smashing whole pinks. They're doing great. Now I know that they were tiny and hadn't even had their first shed yet. That's why they're still gray, because the nichii, when they're born, are like a dirty gray, black looking. They haven't even dropped they don't turn green until they drop that head. And so, I didn't know anything, but I didn't care. I was like, I've never seen these before in my life. And I paid him $300 for the pair. And,
Nice.
They wouldn't eat a darn thing. And I didn't have anyone to teach me about anything. I didn't know anyone keeping arboreal venomous. The venomous community in Oklahoma has always been very minimal at best. It's a little better now, but still it's very minimal. So I looked at books, and I did some reading about, things they ate. And I looked at some old viper keeper videos, because he had some old videos a long time ago with sedge vipers when he first and I took notes from those things, and I set up like a little tank with some house geckos, and used bits of tail as needed, and then used the lizards and started out assisting them, because I didn't know about tease feeding or any of those things, but I knew that I wasn't going to let them not thrive, So I assisted for about 6 months. The male never took off, he kind of just existed and eventually rolled. But the female took off at about 6 months, and I had her about 5 years, and then ended up giving her to a friend, and he had her about another 3 years, and then he had like some kind of AC catastrophe and lost a bunch of really cool. Yeah. But that was my first intro to Atheris, and I was hooked, and I loved them. And then I had some Claracus that I ended up getting, as they were solid yellow little neonates, and I had them. And I think the first trims I ever had were some badass red-eyed pups, and you don't really even see them around anymore. They're not very common. And this was back when I got them for like $45, $50 a piece.
Oh yeah, the good old days, right?
Yeah, and and then I started coming to Texas in like 2007, vending shows, and was doing business with some of the good companies that were around back then, and I was getting badass perps dirt cheap, and trim trigs dirt cheap, and I just have always been hooked by the tree snakes. I like the challenge. I like the attention to detail. It's rewarding to get these tiny little babies that are 4 inches long and as thick as a spaghetti noodle.
Yeah.
And then stress yourself to death and work your butt off until they're big and stable and growing and thriving. And my heart has always been with the Atheris because of the keeled scales, the head structure, the polymorphism. All those things have been so cool. But Squamigera, they weren't around. At least I wasn't online and in the forums back then, so I didn't see people like Derek Morgan, and Jim Campbell back in the day, killing it with them and cranking them out. I didn't know about people. And then, so back in those days, I just cruised king snake every day. It was like the spot, and I would go and look at king snake, and I never ever saw them. And then in 2015, the first shipment that I had really ever seen came in through Underground, and I bought a shitload, and I just kept buying them every year.
So I actually, not to interrupt you, but I was actually going to ask you, so on that Underground shipment in 2015, did you happen to get any black squams out of that?
Yeah, that's where my original black and white male that produces all these white ones came. He came in on that. That was the first black I ever bought, and I still have him to this day, and he's fathered like probably 12 litters, and he's produced all these crazy high white squams. And now his kids are making babies, and I still have him. I still have an original blue and black who's fathered she's put out 3 generations now. Yeah, I still have some animals from that very first group.
So it's funny, man. I opened that crate and had to sort through all those animals, and if it's the same black snake I'm thinking of, that I actually went up I got that snake, and we named him Darth Vader. And I remember Underground had, I guess they oversold the blacks because there's only like 5 of them in that whole shipment. Yeah. And they asked me like, "Hey man, we oversold. Can we sell that snake?" And I said, "Sure, yeah, we got more coming in. Don't worry about it." And that was it. And we never saw him ever again. So I'm happy that if it's the snake I'm thinking of, I'm really happy that you have that snake.
Yeah,
Because that's great to know that.
he's tough, man. He has been whooped. Like, squams are such mean snakes to each other. They are vicious. And like, he has been chomped out like 3 different times by girls. And like, they'll bite each other occasionally, and it's not so bad. But one of the times he got lit up, and he looked like a half-dead piece of junk for about 2 months, and I wasn't sure he was going to pull through. And he did. There's about an inch of his neck that's like fused straight, but he's fine, and he still has put out 4 litters since that bite. And, they are just tough, nasty little snakes, but man, I love them. They're so awesome.
That's great, man. That's great. It's awesome.
Yeah. So what's as far as the squams themselves over other species, what's the focus on the squams? Is it just the polymorphism in general that sort of draws you to them over the other stuff?
I like that. Before, it was like, well, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what colors they're going to be. Yeah. You don't know any of these things, and it's like shooting in the dark every time. And it's not like that anymore, I don't think, for me. I've bred just about every color to itself, and bred just about every color to a black. And I'm pretty comfortable and confident in how my litters come out. I can pretty well spot on say, I breed a black to, say, a red. I'm going to get 2 blacks that are born legit black. I'm going to get a couple that are funky and will turn black. And then I'll get a couple mixtures of odd colors that favor the other parent. And it's consistent. And, so I can look at my babies and pretty comfortably say, this baby is going to mature and look like this. I've had a few oddballs here and there that like completely go the other direction, that I'm like, well, I sure shit didn't see that coming. I wouldn't have sold it if I did. But typically, I can say like, all right, these came from X adults that came from X grandparents. So this baby has these traits, and he's going to favor the mom, or he's going to favor the dad. And I've noticed also that I see grandparent colors coming through. I'll breed a couple, and the babies don't resemble either parent, but they are spot on with grandparents. And then I've had a couple that, within the polymorphism and how crazy and chaotic that is, essentially, I have them come out carbon copies of their parents. And to me, that's really interesting, that with all the variability, they'll still be a perfect clone of their parent. So there's like some systems in there that, essentially like a set model. There's a couple models that come out through this pattern, and then there's the oddballs. But there's consistency in it, and I like figuring that out. And I feel like I'm figuring that out with the black tigers. The Europeans have been cranking out black tigers for a long time. Christian Moisander's a good buddy of mine, and he's, the one who started the black tiger gene and was the first to produce it and reproduce it. And, it hadn't been done here in the States until a few years ago. A buddy of mine got a couple random imports, bred them, and 2 black tigers dropped out. And, he raised them for a little while, and then he got out of snakes. So I bought that group from him. I bought the adults and all the offspring. I raised up the offspring, and while raising the offspring, I compared and looked at, I studied the tigers, the markings they have. I studied pictures of the markings of tigers in Europe, and I kind of noticed all these little similarities on them on the actual tigers and then siblings. And so I, was looking at mine. I'm like, okay, that I believe is essentially a marker for a het, because the black tiger gene seems like it's a simple recessive. You breed a visual to a non-tiger normal, you come out with 100% hets. And a certain portion of those hets, a certain portion out of that litter, all have visual markers for the gene to produce tigers. And so I stared at these snakes for a couple of years until they were ready. And then I bred them this last year, and I got visual tigers. I got what I think are visual hets. And I got, animals that don't show any signs, but I would bet you a fat stack of money they produce tigers. And, the next year is going to be another year producing visual tigers that will continue to kind of prove out what I'm saying. And I've spent a lot of time talking to Christian late at night, because he's over in, I want to say, Switzerland. I cannot remember, but my memory is terrible, so it's not a personal thing. And he agrees, and he's like, I never noticed any of that. And then, but I think you're spot on. And so I like that. I like figuring this shit out. I like figuring out these snakes that are polymorphic, and everyone before put up their hands like, well, I don't know. It's just whatever. There's no telling.
Yeah.
I disagree. I think you can absolutely tell. I think you can actually absolutely figure it out and make claims as to what these genes are and what they do. And, that's what I'm trying to do.
So was the original tiger, that was like the German, was an import and they bred it in Europe, and it just, they brought in a tiger, or was it something that that dropped from a line in like Germany or whatever?
So he said that the originals came out of just some random imports that he bred together. I think there might have been some like a black animal to another one, and then boom, a couple black tigers fell out. And so then he kept back that litter and bred everything, and it proved to be a reproducible thing. And that's how it started. It was just kind of a fate type thing. A few years ago, a chick in Florida got in an import from underground, and it was a green animal, and it dropped 3 tigers. And she kept one, I got one, and my buddy David got one. She lost hers, I lost mine. I had a virus in 2016 that came from another snake, killed a bunch of shit, And it always, when those things happen, you always lose the nicest snakes you have. That's how it works.
Of course, naturally.
Yeah. And the carrier I still have, and has fathered like 6 or mothered, dropped like 6 litters. But I lost the tiger, of course. Anyway, my buddy David, he kept his tiger. It did well. Now I have that animal. I've had that animal about 3 years going on, and I've bred it. And so it mirrors the European high black, what I call European tiger or traditional tiger, and that's the high black with faint, little bands. And then my tigers are different. They have a lower amount of black. But I've also seen an animal that is very similar to my tigers fall out of a Europe tiger litter also. So it seems like it's a variation within that gene.
Mm-hmm.
The gene is kind of its own thing, but then there's also a couple differences within that gene. And so how I'm trying to figure that out further is breed one of my tiger animals to the more traditional to see if it spits out all normals, then I'll know that it's 2 different lines. If it spits out tigers, then I'll know that they are compatible, same gene, and just the variation in the gene.
Mm-hmm.
From the first time I bred these dang snakes, I'm trying to do it in an educated way in a controlled way. And, so that's what I try to do every time.
Is the tiger itself, like the ones I always remember, like when I think of like tigered squam or like black tiger squam, I think of essentially a lime colored animal, like a base color lime or yellow or even like a light green with the black tiger stripes on top. Is it ever like reversed where the base color is darker?
So with the like traditional tigers, it's essentially like a solid black, and it has green or white bands, and they're real symmetrical, real crisp, and they're typically the bands are maybe 3 scales wide at most. Sometimes they're only 1 scale wide, sometimes they're 2, occasionally 3. But the snake is predominantly black. It just has these super crisp, badass green and black bands. And so my tigers are kind of an opposite. They're more like a base color of a weird neon green with black markings, and the black markings on some of them are kind of symmetrical and a few scales wide, like a symmetrical black band that's maybe 3 scales wide, and then some of them are kind of more aberrant, and there's no real rhyme or reason or pattern. It's just gnarly black markings all over the lime, kind of neon base green snake.
Super cool. Awesome.
Yeah, what about the whites? Did you notice any sort of pattern as far as inheritance with those?
So that's another thing I'm trying to figure out. So I bred that original black male that came from underground, and he is a standard black. He's got a solid white belly and a lot of white blushing that kind of goes up his sides. His face is predominantly white. It's white on his tail. I originally bred him to a red female, a super just like brick glowing red female. And there was a funky baby that was born like this lavender purple white. There was a black baby that was probably 60% black, 40% white. And then there were red and orange, like typical red orange babies. So I kept back the black, I kept back the lavender, and I kept back one of the reds. That red one matured and it turned crazy orange, and then it turned like silver and white. And I haven't really posted much, but I have never seen a snake go from orange, like the most bright burnt orange color that glows, to like now it's like a silver burgundy. It's funky. But then so I kept that white one, and it matured out, and at every shed it got more white. A lot of times you'll see oddball squam babies born funky white, but they turn yellow. They turn kind of a faint green. They don't stay white.
Sort of normalize.
Yeah. It's a weird like translucent baby, but it turns to a pretty basic color. So these get more white with age. They go reverse. And now she is 3.5 years old, and she's probably, I don't know, 60% funky white and like 40% a silver, light silvery gray. And the male that was in that litter is a weird silvery black, and then a nice crisp white, large portion of his body. And then that male that produced those has also produced more white animals. He's produced white when I put him to a green and a purple. He produced white with other black females. He fathered a litter with that traditional European tiger, and 3 out of the 6 babies favor the white animals also. And so to me, producing the same kind of babies with multiple different females seems like a trait that he has. It seems like an actual possible legit, other trait that pops up. Because if it didn't pop up with so many different animals in multiple litters, it would have just been like that one litter had those two weird oddball snakes that turned white.
Yeah.
And it's not like that. I sent Jim Campbell a couple animals out of that initial first litter, and his are doing the same thing. His orange female is like a weird splotchy silver and white kind of thing. And so I bred another high white animal back to the original high white female, and both those snakes that I put together, they are like the most picture perfect high white, weird silver. And I think she's gravid. Even as being successful as I have, I still hate saying, oh, yeah, it's a guarantee. And I'm always still second guessing everything. But they locked up about 3 months ago, and she's growing. Typically they would have started basking around 2 months, and she's not basking yet, but she's still growing. So, the one thing in working with animals is there's no guaranteed rule that you can say goes across the board. So just because she's not basking yet, I'm not saying she's not gravid. But if she is gravid and she spits out good viable offspring, 2 whites together should produce essentially an all-white litter if it is a genetic trait. If it is a genetic trait, then that will be a whole new thing that, I accidentally started. But then, it was an accident to get it the first time. I didn't know it was going to happen. But now I've done it. I've got
It'd be pretty freaking awesome to prove it out.
Out, and if I put it back together and it proves out a thing, then that'll be pretty badass in my opinion.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
We'll see. Time will tell. In about 3 to 4 months, we'll know.
I've always considered squams to be like the Amazon tree boas of the venomous world. Like they get imported in huge numbers. They come in a million different colors. There's done, up until I guess now they always sort of got written off as like, oh, you never know what you're going to get baby wise. Like you're going to get all these different colors, just like Amazons.
Yeah.
And it's just funny how similar they are.
Yeah. I think that's, all my favorite snakes are pretty much polymorphic, like the bush vipers, the eyelash vipers. I love Amazons. I kept a bunch when I was younger. I like snakes that are variable like that. Don't get me wrong, I love breeding 2 similar colored snakes and getting a litter of all the same thing. Like, that's cool. Any snakes that you breed and help create life and are successful with is awesome and is special. But I like the variability. I like not knowing what's going to hatch, That's why with my colubrids, I breed and like all the oddball morph colubrids because you don't really know what's going to hatch out, and I dig that, the variability. People laugh and talk about how squams are so easy and they're such basic common snakes, blah blah blah, and it's like, so many, like you said, come in every year, but if they're so stinking easy, why is there only like 5 people that consistently breed them? Why out of the 5,000 that have been imported over the last 5 years, why is it only a handful of us still have animals from 15, when they first came in and are breeding them? Where's all these ones that come in every year going, But I have noticed more people being successful with them, and people ask, like, you're telling everyone what to do too much to where they're breeding them. It's like, well, I want people to be successful, and I want people to do well, and I want people to see the joy and the fun of arboreal vipers before everyone wrote them off as being a nightmare. They sucked and they all die, and no one wanted to jack with them except, select oddball people. But now more people are successful with them. I had a guy shoot me pictures this morning of babies. He got some adults from me last year, and he followed directions in setting them up, and he got babies. And there's a bunch of other people that have been successful like that, and I like that. I like seeing other people light up with the fun and excitement and the joy of, I just helped create these badass little snakes. Hell yeah. And then they go nuts about them.
Yeah, man.
Well, then
That's
you're also
why we do
giving people, you're giving people the advantage of animals that aren't, they don't need to be treated. They don't need to, you don't have to pump them full of meds and then risk people getting bit. And they're just like chondros. They're starting off on a much better foot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. There was a guy local to me who that 2015 shipment we got at Underground. Excuse me. He got a handful of snakes, not even knowing like what the gender ratio was, and he held on to them. And I think he had 1 or 2 clutches a couple years ago, and then he just kind of like he was just keeping them because he liked them, and he wound up selling them to Josiah from Underground, and he just got 2 litters last week. So. Yeah. Yeah, and it was a green to green and a yellow to yellow, and both clutches came out 50-50 yellow and green. And then in one of them, I just saw the babies yesterday. One of the babies from the green clutch is really, really dark green, and obviously they haven't had their first shed yet. But I'm really eager to see what that one animal turns into, because who knows? When the blacks are born, are they born black, or are they like a gray color and they evolve into the black?
So what I have noticed, if there's no black in the adults, like if neither of the parents are black and you get like funky gray babies, everyone gets excited about gray babies, but gray just turns blue, or it just turns like a dark green. Now, if there's a black in the mix, I have seen babies born legitimate, like they'll have a black head and then the body might be kind of like an olive color. If it's got a black head, I'm like, all right, it's black for sure. That's just a pattern I've seen. Each of my black males kind of has a pattern for how his babies start out and change. And, there's babies that are born just about straight up black, and you obviously know. And then there's like the oddballs that have a black head and like a drab green body, and people are like, oh, I don't know, it kind of looks green. Because I'm telling them, I'm like, yeah, I'll sell you that one, it's black, blah blah. And they're like, are you sure it's green? I'm like, just freaking trust me, I've seen a couple of these babies.
Yeah.
And it's a black snake, I promise you. And then they turn black. And then I have learned that the uglier the baby is, or the more weird and random one, those are the ones I'm keeping. My buddy Tommy, he had a litter a couple years ago. It was like his second litter that he produced, and the litter like had 4 or 5 just smoking fire engine red babies, and then it had a bunch of like dirty greenish brown with some bands. And I was like, listen, sell all those red pieces of junk, keep those ones. And he's like, what, are you serious? I'm like, listen, bro, just trust me, man. The reds and orange, get them all day long, and they're beautiful snakes, and they're gonna grow up and be smoking reds. Those weird ones that are kind of ugly right now, those are where it's at, bro. Those are what you need to keep. And those ones grew up to be weird neon green, purple banded, gray green, almost black with neon green bands. I'm like, those are the ones. You always hold back and keep the funky, ugly stuff, because that's the stuff that that's what does the really cool things and through the change.
Yeah.
You get a red baby, an orange baby, like that's awesome. It's gonna just continue to be brighter, and everyone loves a red and orange. But I like the weird stuff. I like the funky stuff that you look at it and you're like, what the hell is that thing? That's what interests me. So yeah. Anyway, back to it. with greens and yellows, you pair green and yellow or any kind of mix of those, your babies are going to be green and yellow. They might start off, you might get a bunch of neon solid yellow babies, but 9 out of 10 times they turn green or they get some green saddles and blotches. I've noticed some colors are dominant. Green is obviously dominant. Yellow is a pretty dominant snake, but a solid yellow is a rarity. You'll get a lot of babies born solid yellow, but they don't stay solid yellow. They turn orange, they turn red, they turn green. A solid yellow adult is something exciting and unique. It's not as common. But those babies that are odd and gray or like a silvery blue, they typically turn like a kind of a sky powder blue or a kind of like a aqua type greenish blue. But you never know. I have, like I said, noticed that grandparent colors are important. So, you get some import adults, you don't know what color their parents are. There's no telling what mom and dad actually looked like. So you could breed them together and, get some wild, funky things come out of that. And you just have to wait and see.
Super cool, man. Super cool. I love it.
And I mean, just the sheer number of babies you have to produce and look at and then hold on to see sort of how they change. Like, I mean, how many squams are you talking about? Like, with this whole learning all of this, how many squams do you think it's taken, like, producing and buying and sort of tinkering with over the years?
So, I think in 2015, I think I bought maybe 30 or 40 the first year, and I kept like 5 out of that group. And then the next year, I bought 30 or 40. No, I think in 16 I bought like probably 50 or 60, and I kept like 5 out of that group. And I got a big old group, and like most of them were just sick as shit when I got them, and most of them super sucked. But I would just buy as many as possible every year, and buy 10, keep 1 out of that 10. Buy 20, keep 2 out of that. Or buy a group of 10 just to keep the 2 black animals out of the group. And I think I don't honestly know. I probably have 40, maybe 40 or 50 adults now. And then I have probably 20 adults that I have produced and raised up and started breeding. And maybe like 30 initial adults from over the years, and then like 20 adults that I've kept back and produced. And then I have probably 20 yearlings I've kept back. And then this year, so far I've produced 9 litters this year. And I have a couple more gravid that should go. So I should get at least for sure 10 litters this year, but maybe 11 or 12, I don't know. And I've kept,
and that's just squams?
Yeah, just squams.
Dude, that's crazy awesome.
I've kept back 3 whole litters this year because they had visual tiger animals. So I'm not getting rid of any tiger genetic stuff until probably 23, like 2023. I'll probably start selling tigers. But I did the same thing with blacks. I started collecting every black I could. Everyone that came in, I would buy up, and all the captive born and bred blacks in the country, except maybe like 5, I produced. And so I waited till I had about 20 blacks just for my own personal use. And then I started selling some, and I think I've sold 10 or 15. Yeah, I probably sold like 15 or so. And so I'll do the same thing, with the whites. I haven't sold any high whites. I've sold 1 white litter mate. And but other than that, I haven't sold any of the legit high white animals, and I won't until I have at least 10 or 15 of those. I haven't sold any tigers. I'm not going to sell any tigers until I have, 15 or 20 of those by myself. Then I'll have enough to feel comfortable in selling a handful here and there. It's not that I don't want to sell them. I just don't want anyone to have them. I just want to have them all. I like them. I've worked my butt off breeding just these snakes and, specifically trying to figure it out. Once I have a number that I'm comfortable with and I got a whole wall of just tigers that I made, then I'll sell some, just like the blacks. I got stacks of cages that are all just different black animals that I produced and made and had, and so I'll sell them here and there. And there's no point in working your butt off and getting something figured out and then selling the project.
Right.
Yeah.
Sell yourself short.
Hey, I did all this work and figured this out. Go ahead and have fun and, keep it going. Let me know how you do. Like, that doesn't make sense. Any of these people, like these crazy chondro people or any of the crazy constrictor people, the people that we look at and we're like, dadgum, they really figured it out and they really are doing the most and they're the boss of X species. It's because they bought all they could, they bred all they could, they hoarded all they could until they figured it out, and then they started letting them out to the public. And so, that's what I'm doing. So I've been very fortunate to be friends with a lot of the real badass OG dudes like Jim Campbell, Derek Morgan, Christian Moisander, these people that are like the original kings of it. And, they let me pick their brain and learn from them years ago. And so I'm trying to do it, like when you think of tiger eyelash vipers, you think of Jim Campbell. He's been doing it since the freaking 70s. And, it's like the godfather of that. I'm just trying to work my butt off and do that with the squams. The same thing my buddy Rhett's doing. Tommy's working towards it. Rhett down in Florida has been killing it with squams for years. And there's other people that have been doing it, and that's what I just want to do. I'm just trying to really figure them out and be able to leave real information and real years and years of consistent quality captive animals and bloodlines. So, in 20 years, people can be like, oh man, that was England line of whatever the heck, Squamagera, that's what I want. That's the kind of stuff I've looked up to since I was a kid. And, I don't know how, but I've gotten to where I'm doing that. And I don't know how, but people think I'm somebody and something, and it's
well, I don't want to speak for Justin, but I think you're there, bud.
Yeah.
I think you're freaking there, man. It's awesome.
Well, you did what it seems like a lot of people struggle to do, which is you have a goal and you have sort of a vision and you notice something and you stick with it. You pursue it for longer than 4 or 5 years, and you see what's going on, and instead of saying hey, I got all these things selling for $1 bajillion, and then kind of just move on, like you notice it, you see it, you're pursuing it, and I think that's sort of what makes the difference.
Trying to I try to be helpful and keep it going and be approachable and lend help when I can, because there's a lot of people that don't do that, and there's a lot of people that do. And we all keep snakes in boxes. That's
right.
The bottom line. Some of us do it better than others. Some of us do it for different reasons. But why not try to help each other and work together and collectively grow and learn and give these animals the best life they can and provide the best quality animal you can for future keepers, so they can keep going.
100%.
So I'm especially curious about, and we talked about it kind of earlier today, before we, started this, but I've been fairly vocal about my stance on squams as a first venomous, and I don't know exactly. I think me and Phil have talked about it, but what's your thoughts on squams, or really any Atheris as a first venomous? Because in my opinion, it seems kind of foolish, because you don't have, there is no antivenom for those things. Doctors aren't going to know what the hell to do. Anybody who listens to the show knows like this is the same spiel I have for a lot of stuff, but it just seems like squams in particular seem to be very popular as a first venomous.
So I can see both sides of the coin. So if someone, I recently sold a girl a Squamagera as her first venomous. She had been talking to me and asking me questions about them for, man, I don't know, probably at least 6 months, asking me all sorts of questions, doing the most reading, studying, learning everything she could. Mm-hmm. And I sent her a well-started, long-term captive, a couple months captive import juvenile. So it's past the tricky stage where